from beginning the IAC meeting due to construction and traffic in Baltimore, and we're waiting for Secretary Churchill, who has just arrived. But could I have staff just introduce yourselves, since we do have Senator Casemeyer as a new board member, so.
I'll start by introducing
Yeah.
Jay Schulte,
Right,
because he's
'cause
new.
he is new.
He's an executive associate and also acts as an analyst, but you can say something more about yourself if you like. He's very, very good. We're lucky to have him.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. This is my first meeting here, but I'm excited, and yeah, like Bob said, I'm really working with him and with Cassandra primarily on analysis work. We're building a model right now, and I'll be seeing all of you in the future a lot, I'm sure, so excited to be here.
I'm Cassandra Viscara. I'm the Program Support Administrator for the IAC.
I'm Jen Schaefer. I'm Deputy Director of the IAC. I'm handling some of the special projects.
Hi, I'm Spelber, Program Manager for the Schools and Community College, DTS, and designee for Ellington Church Center.
Mason, School Facilities Bridge at the State Department of Education.
I'm Alex Donahue, Manager of Special Projects for the IAC.
Jamie?
I'm Jamie Bridges. I'm the Baltimore City Program Manager for the IAC.
I'm Kimberly Spivey. I'm the Manager of Fiscal Services for the IAC.
David Freeze, I'm the Facilities Group Manager for the IAC.
Carrie?
Carrie Bisling, I'm the Administrator of Programs and Finance.
I'm Melissa Wyatt. I'm the Program Process Administrator for the IAC.
Thank you all.
So we've expanded. We used to only have a few people, so we have a little leeway, and I think we're going to be expanding in the future, hopefully. So.
Yeah, Jamie's our only project manager currently
Right.
assigned to Baltimore City. We're advertising now for a project manager. I think our second location will be Prince George's.
Yeah, that
They
makes
have a lot
sense.
going on.
Yeah, they do.
And to improve communications, understanding of their needs is helpful for us to be able to bring recommendations to you all and offer best practices back to them.
Right. Very good. All right, well, I guess we can go ahead and begin. I'm sure the secretary will be up shortly, but it is now 9:26, and we are opening the July 9th meeting of the IAC. We do have a quorum. We have Senator Laylaw on the phone. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Sorry you're held up in traffic as well, but appreciate that you've called in.
I just pulled off to the side and I'm going to do it by telecom.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Again, like to welcome Senator Casemeyer to the IAC. This is his second meeting already. So he's an old hat at this now. So we're going to begin the agenda with the consent agenda. Oh, first of all, are there any revisions to the agenda?
No revisions, Madam Chair.
All right, great. And we have no one for public comment today.
None, Madam Chair.
All right. Okay, so then we can go to the consent agenda, and I will ask if we have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move.
All right, do we have a second? Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. And there is the secretary. Good morning. We just began, so you are really not tardy at all. And we have noted for the record about the horrendous traffic and craziness out in the Baltimore Street area. I almost thought I was in Annapolis this morning with the work going on there. But anyway, we have a motion and a second for the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, and motion carries unanimously. The second part of today's agenda is in section 2 of your book, and this has to do with the Innovation Incentive Pilot Program revisions, and Cassandra's going to report on this.
Madam Chair, members, you might remember that you voted to approve these administrative procedures back in May. We had one project that did apply as an innovation incentive pilot program in FY 2020 that you all made a preliminary approval for earlier in the year. The changes that we brought to you are really simple. You can see them on pages 78. There's just one very minor change to make it clear that the approval of funding by the IAC also includes the approval of the contract, which is the approval you all make that actually sets the amount of the budget. And then on pages 80 and 81, we have added sections to clarify the procurement and contract award and the payment and closeout. For the most part, this program is an add-on to the capital improvement program. There's no specific funding for this program. It changes the way that we allocate funds. But this program also exempts these projects from certain regulations. So these clarifications were needed just to show where the process for these projects differs from that of our regular capital improvement program.
Any questions for Cassandra on these changes? Terry? All right, so do we have a motion to approve the changes?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, motion carries unanimously. In section 3, we just are going to have an update from Jamie on the HVAC projects. And welcome, Jamie. We have a nice new table with more dots on it this time.
Yes, Madam Chair, good morning. Members of the Commission, good morning. As you know, the 2009 capital budget bill set aside an extra $15 million for HVAC projects in Baltimore City. After a fair amount of work on behalf of both the IAC and city schools, we were able to approve 23 projects and start to move those forward. And the IAC requested that we continue to provide updates on those projects. So this is the update as of June 25. If you want to follow along, you can see the table on page 86. I'll just start with some project status updates. 5 projects at this point are operational, and 1 is in construction procurement. 10 are in design, and 7 are in design procurement. At this meeting, the IAC has already approved a design contract for a chiller replacement at Highlandtown 215 and a design contract for boiler replacement at Harlem Park 78. So actually we now have 12 in design and 5 in design procurement. As far as project health goes, at this time 17 are operational or not behind. 5 are less than 1 month behind, and there is 1 that is under 2 months behind. I will make a note of that at Windsor Hills Elementary School, the chiller project. They received a sort of pretty high estimate from the first design consultant on their list, and so they decided to move on to another one, see if they can get a better price. As I said at this meeting, the IAC has approved 2 more design contracts, and looking ahead to the next meeting, we will be looking to start adjusting some of the allocations since design is wrapping up on a number of the jobs, and a more clear estimate of the cost is coming in. So we'll look to shuffle a little bit and keep in touch with the priorities. If there are any questions, I'm here for those.
I have one suggestion, and that's
Sure.
because we may have people that might be colorblind. Could you do, on these charts, do like a summary of the number of ones that are either not behind or ahead of schedule versus the number of ones that are behind either 1, 2, or 3 months? And that, I think, will give us a general quick overview, because I'm trying to count that right now, or, when you review your materials, and I think it would be helpful if you would just add those little numbers, just those 2.
I would be glad to.
Okay? All right, any other questions for Jamie? Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate your work on this and keeping everything going in Baltimore City.
Thank you.
Cassandra is going to give us, Jamie is still up on Baltimore City Vertical Package Unit. Now, these, as I understand, these units are, and you probably are going to tell us this, but I'd like to do a little cue set for you. These units are are more expensive, but they're certainly more efficient in the long run. And I think that the decision to go towards this is probably a good one. But you can give us the details, Jamie, and that's in section 4.
I sure can. So for some background, in a letter dated January 21st, 2019, CEO of City Schools provided an update on their plan to install air conditioning in the remainder of classrooms in city schools that do not have air conditioning. According to the City Schools, the original plan was developed and delivered in January 2017, and the full scope of implementation of vertical package units was not fully known. The update provided based on 24 months of plan implementation, and in particular on actual bid prices, a revised cost estimate for the VPU installation. The units themselves, $20,000 per. However, based on the actual bid prices, they found the prices were closer to $40,000 to $55,000, due mostly to electrical upgrades required to support the VPUs. City School, however, still considers those to be preferable over window AC units, which would require the same electrical upgrades. Because VPUs both heat and cool, they meet codes and standard requirements, in particular for ventilation, fresh air intake, and have a lower total cost of ownership. In response to that
I
letter,
just wanted to say, I think what's important to remember, if you picture the window unit, I mean, there is a button where you can turn on, it says fresh air comes in, but it's just really doesn't do a good job. I like the idea that you can really generate fresh air from these machines.
absolutely.
Much healthier for the students.
Great. In response to that letter, the staff of IAC met with City Schools to make sure that we could complete as many of these mission-critical VPU projects as possible. On March 21st, the IAC approved a request from City Schools to cancel 13 VPU projects in prior CIPs and use funds once allocated to the canceled projects to fund 7 of the VPU projects in the current CIP. On June 13th, the IAC approved a similar request to cancel 1 VPU project from a prior CIP and to use funds once allocated to the project and additional funds reserved for City Schools to fund the project in the current CIP. Also on June 13, the IAC asked for a report on City Schools' portfolio of VPU projects and in particular on the chances of additional cancel amend actions, such as the ones I've just described above, for VPU projects in the future. So if you'll flip over to page 88, there are a number of tables, and I will walk through them and sit for questions if there are them. First, table 1 by fiscal year. As you see, there are 4 projects from fiscal 2018, 1 from 2019, and 1 from 2020. However, originally there were 7 in 2018, 6 in 2019, and 6 in 2020. The updated number reflects those actions that were taken to make sure that we could get those priority projects moving. Table 2, project by status. Notable 11 of 19 projects are either operational or under construction. That's about 58% of projects. And then that equates to 597 of 888 classrooms either operational or under construction. That is 67% of approved VPU projects. Table 3, VPU projects by chance of cancellation. And I would disclaim that the classifications and criteria for the chances of cancellation are mine and mine alone, and have been noted at the bottom of that table. Essentially, the estimates were developed per the request of the Commission, and in order to better anticipate the workload associated with additional cancel and amend items, they are based on a recent City Schools update to the City Council. And in brief, projects that have been noted to have no chance of cancellations are those that are either operational or under construction. Projects that are reported, the 3 projects that are reported with little to no chance have been reported to be in pre-construction phase. And I believe the IAC approved one of those contracts this morning. Projects that are, the 6 projects noted to have little chance are reported as in design, but they have been approved with an allocation based on the $50,000 cost estimate per classroom that, that is consistent with the bid prices. And then finally, the one project that is reported as with some chance of cancellation is in design phase with an approved allocation that is not based on the 50,000 cost per classroom estimate. I should note, however, that a number of the projects in 2018 CIP, the ones that are operational, in fact, came in above budget, and the city was able to continue with implementation. So this is just a rough estimate based on what we know now, and I will continue to monitor that. As far as anticipated projects by fiscal year, probably over the next 2 years, we'll see the remainder of the 12 projects. That entails about 588 classrooms. And the anticipated project status, projects by status, 6 of those are already in the planning, the design stage. In fact, because 4 of them were moved, were shifted back in order to fund the 7 priority VPU projects. So they've already got a good start on those and an understanding the cost estimate. Finally, by approval status, we have 888 classrooms have been approved for implementation, and 588 are on the horizon with 12. I just do want to note that the uncertainties associated with utilization rates and portfolio decisions make the 12 projects not the one true number. We'll again monitor that, and cost estimates are based on current estimated cost of classroom at $50,000. I do want to note that these anticipated projects are at, as you see in Table 6, they are at even older buildings compared to the ones where we have approved projects, and in cases even more unique buildings, buildings like Paul Dunbar Middle and City College High School. So, we would expect to continue to work with the city just as we have to make sure that these projects keep moving just as they have. If there's any additional questions, I'm here for them.
Madam Chair.
Secretary.
Thank you for the presentation. 2 quick questions.
Sure.
Can you hear me? Yes, 2 quick questions. I take it in your chart or Table 3, where you have the category of some, that there's a high likelihood that Baltimore City will change the plan for this to be within the 50,000 approval, and that will have to come back to us at some point, or is?
I would say that there is a possibility of that occurring. That would not surprise me, but like I said, they have certainly used some local funds to cover some gaps on other projects. So, but yeah, that would be, as you know, there were more projects in 18 and 19 that were rolled forward. That is one that was not, that was a 2019 project that was not rolled forward. So the 2020, the new projects that were approved in 2020 are based on the 50,000. So that's just sort of the one
That's the one outlier at the moment.
That's right.
I understand that. So, and it's always good just to keep a correct frame on the entire project. Baltimore City is making great strides to get all of their schools conditioned. In the overall schedule, when are they projecting that all schools will be fully compliant with the new HVAC system? How far down the line are we anticipating? What year?
Well, I would expect, though I don't know for certain, that with these 12 projects, they will be approved in the next 2 fiscal years. And so a most optimistic construction schedule would put construction to begin on those final projects someplace in May of 2021. So, that would
They
be
have guaranteed everything would be done by 22, 23, correct?
Yes, they may have
Original
initially done so, but again, there was some slippage based on those higher than expected cost estimates.
Yeah, absolutely understand that. I know they're working at a very quick pace to try to get all schools covered. So it's always good just to keep a frame of reference as to when the total project is going to be complete. So.
That's great. Well, I should mention, as you know, the city has been working pretty hard to keep these projects moving and make them happen. I also should mention, it's in the report, but I did not mention it, that the IAC has also been working pretty hard. Those cancel and amend items are not without work on staff and the IAC on consideration, but it is noted that 8 of these projects now that could have been pushed back 1 year are moving along on time, and that saved about $470,000 in state funds, back of the envelope calculations based on 4% escalation. But it's also making sure those kids are getting in a classroom that's got heat and air as soon as possible. So, cheers.
Any other questions for Jamie? Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to section 5, and Cassandra's going to give us a quick report on the work group for educational development specifications final report, which is found on pages 98 through 126 in your books. Cassandra?
Yes, Madam Chair. Members, as you all know, House Bill 1783 created the work group on educational development specifications. Mr. Lombardo and Bob were members of that work group. On page 98 of your agenda, behind tab 5, you'll see the specific legislative language requiring the work group to look at various components of the school construction process. Behind tab 5, you'll find a copy of the entire report. In general, the work group's recommendations try to balance ensuring that schools are educationally sufficient while also ensuring that they're fiscally sustainable. Page 6 of the report highlights some of the major discussion themes, many of which are also common themes in your conversations here, including the total cost of ownership of a school facility, the importance of maintenance, and the importance of LEA flexibility. Appendix B begins on page 122 and sorts the recommendations by responsible actor. On pages 123 and 124, you'll see the recommendations that the work group made specific to the IAC. I'm not going to go into the details of the report outside of these recommendations that are specific to you all. You'll notice that you've already taken action on a couple of these things, such as the first item, which recommends that the IAC adopt revised square footage allowances, which have been renamed to be the gross area baselines, and to allow for variances if a school district or an LEA can justify a need for additional space. You all approved those in May. We'll bring specific proposals for these items to future meetings, so I'm going to stay at a high level today. The work group has recommended that the IAC clarify in COMAR and in the APG that the layout and design of school space falls under local control. There was a lot of discussion in the work group about the perception of state advice and state guidance as a requirement, and a need for clarifying that we are technical experts who are helping to advise but not mandating local decisions. Many of the recommendations that you see on page 123 center around the IAC's role as a support organization that provides technical expertise to the LEAs. A few of these, the work group recommended that the IAC research and share information on multi-use best practices and models, that the IAC create and maintain life cycle cost analysis comparable standards and measures that would be used in a tool for calculating the total cost of ownership. You all took the first step toward this in May when you agreed that the LEAs should submit preliminary total cost of ownership estimates. Those were general and mostly space-driven. The next step is to look at specific component systems in a school and their expected life cycles and create some comparable standards. The work group has recommended the implementation of post-occupancy evaluations so that we can learn from the designs and the execution of these projects and make improvements moving forward. And the implementation of the National Council on School Facilities definitions of key facilities data elements. We've shared those definitions with you before. Reporting of expenditures based on those definitions would allow us to sort out the difference between facility maintenance on an HVAC and maintenance on a school bus, which right now are all lumped together in one cost category when they're reported to NCES. and to explore the implementation of real-time utilities metering so that we can see the energy usage and make sure that the buildings are performing the way that they were specified to perform in the designs. You'll also notice that a number of these recommendations deal with cooperative use agreements. Those are the next several, including researching questions and resources, providing technical assistance and best practices, and developing an online toolkit for the information. This goes back to that cost of ownership. A lot of schools have community use space in them, where the folks who benefit from that space may or may not be participating in the cost to use that space. Everything from electrical to janitorial. So this would just give the LEAs some tools that they could use, not direction, but tools that they could use to better manage that sharing. Moving on to page 124, the work group recommends that the IAC consider tracking square footage over the state's allowable amount for major projects and reducing the state's participation in future systemics proportionally. So right now, the IAC only participates up to a certain square footage in a school based upon the eligible enrollment. But when that same project comes back, if they overbuild by 30% and they come back for an HVAC replacement, we pay for the full amount. The work group is recommending that the IAC consider reducing our participation in that future systemic project based upon the amount of the school that was overbuilt. Again, the amount, that foundation amount, would be set by you all, and if the school could justify additional square footage, that would be noted in the record so they wouldn't get penalized for that. Another recommendation is to transition the current state-rated capacity to a state facility capacity so that that number remains more stable based upon what the building was designed for, rather than maybe just some administrative choices that have been made. A big emphasis on the work group was that the state be more flexible. One recommendation toward this goal is to develop a system for maximizing joint use school facilities. Basically, the work group wanted to look at any creative way to utilize underutilized spaces and for the state to encourage that rather than having state policies and procedures that prohibited it. In order to provide information needed to predict enrollments and migration patterns, the work group recommends that the IAC develop partnerships with GIS experts to implement a GIS system of tracking student enrollments. This also supports another recommendation that the IAC work with the LEAs to support more accurate long-range supply-demand analysis. Under 2C, still on page 124, you'll see that total cost of ownership comes up again, but with the IAC in an advisory, not a regulatory role, just to help the LEAs look at the total cost of ownership based upon the facilities decisions they're making and advise them. Under 4A, the work group has recommended that the IAC review and revise a specific regulation to allow more flexibility to increase project costs where a situation merits it. This is the COMAR regulation that says that you all have the authority to increase a project cost, but only if the school district is in a one Maryland county. You all took preliminary action on this when you approved the COMAR revisions. Those have, the ALR review has been completed. Those should be published in the Maryland Register and on our website any day now for public comment. So we'll be bringing those back to you hopefully in September for final approval. The work group further recommended that the IAC consider setting aside some portion of annual new authorization to have available if projects come in over and can justify it. So no, with that COMAR change, you have the flexibility to do it, but you may not have funding until the next fiscal year. The work group is recommending that you set aside some portion of your new authorization just in case a project needs it, and then anything that you didn't use would be reallocated in the following fiscal year. Finally, the work group recommends that the IAC analyze and report information on variances, which is what we're calling it when you do approve the additional square footage, and like you did for Greensboro just a couple months ago. Again, focusing on flexibility, the IAC does not currently participate in the purchase of facilities that will be renovated to become a school. The work group wants the IAC to consider participating in the acquisition of a building if a feasibility study demonstrates that it could be the best solution. Next, under 5A and 5B, we've already discussed, though it bears repeating, information on the total cost of ownership and comparable expenditure information would provide the LEAs and the state better information to make decisions and understand the true cost of facilities over time. And your last recommendation on page 124, the work group recommends that the IAC consider incentives that would increase the state share of systemic projects if the system to be replaced has exceeded its expected life. So this ties in with developing those comparable life cycle cost analysis numbers that we talked about earlier, but it would reward LEAs who had maintained a system well enough that it exceeded the life that we expected it to achieve. It would reward good maintenance, basically. So that was a whole lot of information really quickly. There is a lot of detail in this report that is really good, and if you have any questions now or later, we're always available. With that, I'd stand for questions.
I'd like to just thank Dick and Brian for both spending an inordinate amount of time on this work group, and I wonder if, Dick, you wanted to add anything to Cassandra's summary?
No, I think Cassandra summarized it quite well, but I would just compliment Bob and the work group for, I think, what I felt was pretty well focused and common sense, logical, a lot of very just good, rational thinking that was brought to the process, and I think positive results are going to emanate from all of that.
So it seems to me that there needs to be some kind of a strategic plan or playbook to get through these recommendations. Have you, or Bob, have you thought about that? Because it's a huge lift in terms of all the pieces that have to be done to get this in statute. So what are you thinking about that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're wanting to see what the funding work group does.
Okay.
Because I think that some of these
Comes
things will
together.
overlap. Some of these things surely fall under this commission. Some of them are going to come directly from the work group to the legislature, but there's a lot of overlap.
Very true.
Now, with that said, we have kept in mind a lot of this work. For example, the last one about rewarding for lifespan that's increased. In the RFP, and the contract we'll enter into for the assessment, that's part of setting this system up, so that we are looking
Right.
at systems and being able to provide that kind of information if it's ever available. So I think that it would be, I'm not trying to beat around the bush, but to build a strategic plan at this particular point, I think we have done so by naming these points, that we should bring them to you to consider. As soon as the funding work group, it's clear what direction is going to occur, we should flesh it all out and create a strategic
Put it
plan and
together.
adopt it as an agency, and under your direction.
All right, that sounds like you have thought that out, and it makes sense to me. And just because it's in here, Cassandra, do you want to just talk a bit about the next work group that we are engaged in right now?
Yes, Madam Chair. On the last page of your report, you'll see just a brief one-pager about the work group on the assessment and funding of school facilities. Dr. Salmon is chairing that work group, and you'll see the objectives that work group has, primarily to consider how relative facility condition should be prioritized, if and how the results of the assessment should be used to direct state funding. And then there's an incentive piece as well, where the funding work group is required to look at incentives that would reduce the total cost of ownership. We have a schedule of 5 meeting dates. The first date is going to be August 28th at 9 o'clock in Annapolis, and we'll publish all of the subsequent dates to our website in the coming days.
Madam Chair, if I could add, it's an aggressive schedule. And again, I would like to thank the EdSpec work group for all the time they put in. I don't know that we have that amount of time to put in this time.
No,
So
we
we're
don't.
trying to bring information broadly and then bring to a focus quickly.
Right.
So to do that, we are developing currently 4 webinars. And this will be beneficial for a lot of reasons. They will be portfolio management, total cost of ownership, maintenance effectiveness, and educational sufficiency. These are all cornerstone discussions. And as we go through them in some detail on the webinar, we'll push this out to everybody, all of the LEAs, anybody else that's interested, so that we're bringing the understanding of these concepts up universally. We'll have a chat window so that we can take questions and answer them and develop a lot of understanding, and at the same time possibly even questions that are begging an answer for the funding work group to answer. So I think that it'll be beneficial in a lot of ways, and it'll allow your work group to be able to move effectively. At the first meeting of August 28th, our intent is to jump right in and hypothetically show how an assessment could work with various weighting, and this will be for your work group to understand, to prioritize the highest needs or the furthest away from educational sufficiency. Lots of variables in that. Jay has just jumped right in and built these worksheets for us, so I think that we'll be able to come out of that first meeting with some clear direction of where you want to go.
So when will the webinars be available? Or are they prior to August or after August?
They are going to be prior. We will
Okay.
have completed all 4 of them prior to your August 28th meeting.
Okay, and then are we using them at the meeting? How are you envisioning this to occur?
We'll bring the information from those webinars to the meeting for your consideration. In fact, after each one, we'll summarize them and then publish them so that they're available information for all the members before your meeting, but we'll have them available for reference at the meeting.
Okay. All right. Other questions for Cassandra on the original report? Okay. Thank you all very much. That's very good. We're now going to move on to section 5, which is the Aging Schools Program, and ask Arabia to come up and give us an update on the 2020 allocations and the summary of the fiscal year 2019. This is found on page 127 through 141 in your book. Arabia, good to
Yes.
see you.
And good to see you as well. Good morning.
Good morning.
For informational purposes, we are providing a report on the fiscal year 2020 Aging Schools Program, as well as general information for program years 18 and 19, as shown in Table 1 of this item. Funding under the ASP program is to provide capital improvements to aging public school buildings and sites so that when projects are completed, the school building continues to be safe, well-maintained, and the delivery of educational programs are enhanced. The funding levels established for each county are in Education Article 5-206 and total $6.1 million. Any unused funds from prior years are recycled back to the LEA. Because state general obligation bonds are used, all eligible projects are required to have a 15-year anticipated lifespan. While the LEA is not required to provide a local match, they are required to have local funds available to cover all costs above the state's allocation. Information regarding ASP is circulated annually, and we begin to receive projects beginning in early April. To date, a total of 33 projects have been approved for fiscal year 2020. Evaluated project scopes range from plumbing replacements, sidewalk replacements, to the installation of new playground equipment. The table in the motion provides a breakdown of the funding per program year. In accordance with COMAR, the IAC or its designee shall evaluate project requests, and as your staff, we will continue to provide updates on an annual basis. I'm available for questions.
Arabia, how many more projects do we anticipate coming in? Do we have any knowledge of?
We generally get between 70 to 83, somewhere around that.
All right.
So maybe about 50 more projects.
Right, because I noticed there's some counties that haven't submitted anything yet. so-
Yes, they have up until April of
April of
2020.
2020, right.
Yes.
Okay, good to know. Any questions for Arabia on the Aging Schools Program? All right, hearing none, thank you very much for that update.
Thank you.
Now we will go to section 7, and Joan's going to update us on the 2019 School Safety Grant Program applications, and that's on pages 142 and 143 of your books. Joan, good morning.
Good morning, Commission members. This informational item is the updated report on the school safety program, the FY 2019 Round 2. And it shows that we received 180 applications from 7 LEAs, totaling $2.03 million. Since printing, we have received a request for 10 more projects from St. Mary's County, and I can just add that several of the applications are in review right now, or we are awaiting some additional information. Behind the item is a summary report showing the status of all the applications to date. And I might want to add that we're a little surprised that we haven't received more requests for projects. And that is because, if you recall, we removed applying the state-local cost share formula from the allocation process, and that was because we saw that there was a problem with the LEAs, and we thought this might speed things along. From informal conversations that I've had with several LEAs, it sounds like they are in the process. However, I think it is time for us to put out another memo and make some other phone calls, much like we did with the first round.
That would be a great idea.
And these applications are due the end of September, at which point then we start the next year.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I think we do need to send out a reminder memo. I'd be happy to sign it with Bob, and
Thank you.
let's definitely get this
That would be
done,
helpful.
because
Thank you.
there are lots of blanks here on this summary sheet, and this is really a lot of money for everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of surprised that we haven't gotten
we are
more.
too.
So if you can draft something for us, we'll be glad to send it out to the superintendents.
Absolutely. Any other questions on these projects?
Questions for Joan? All right, thank you very much, Joan. Keep us posted on all of that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that formally ends the open part of our meeting today. We are, I guess we'll take a, we need to go into a closed session to discuss one legal item. We will also, I will also entertain a motion to adjourn the open session.
A motion to adjourn?
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries, and we're going to go into the room back there, and we will not be coming back in open session.